I remember standing in my kitchen, stirring sugar into my morning coffee, the sunlight warm on my face. Just a regular Tuesday, when my phone buzzed with an anonymous text, "Your husband, Arthur, is with someone else. She just laughed when you said you'd survive without him." My hands trembled, coffee sloshing over the rim. What a strange, gut-wrenching message, making me wonder who she was and how this would shatter my carefully built life, transforming everything I thought I knew. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'd love to know. My name is Brenda, and for 10 years, I believed I had a good life, a quiet, dependable sort of good. Arthur and we were a team. He worked in financial planning, a steady job with decent pay, and I managed our home, volunteered at the local animal shelter, and generally kept our world running smoothly. I'd put my dreams of opening a small consulting firm on hold, telling myself it was a temporary pause, just until Arthur's career was more established. He always said, "Brenda, you're the rock, the glue. We'll get to your dreams soon, I promise." And I believed him. We lived in a cozy little house, the kind with a big oak tree in the front yard that scattered golden leaves every autumn. I loved that tree. I loved our little life, or at least I thought I did. That Tuesday after the anonymous text, the world felt different. Like a filter had been removed, and everything was too bright, too sharp. I tried to push it away, telling myself it was a cruel joke, some random wrong number. But the words, "She just laughed when you said you'd survive without him," stuck with me. Who said that? When? And why was I so convinced, deep down, that it felt true? I went through the day in a haze, volunteering at the shelter, trying to focus on cleaning kennels, but my mind kept replaying that phrase, a broken record in my head. When Arthur came home that evening, he was his usual self, maybe a little tired, a little distracted, but nothing overtly suspicious. He asked about my day, ate the dinner I'd cooked, and even chuckled at a story I told about a particularly mischievous beagle. I watched him, searching for cracks in his composure, for any sign that the man across the table from me was leading a double life. But I saw nothing. Just Arthur. My Arthur. "You seem quiet tonight, Bren," he said, pushing his plate away. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, the text burning in my pocket. "Just tired, I guess. Long day." It was a lie, a flimsy one. The truth felt too big, too dangerous to even whisper. The quiet tension stretched over the next few days. I found myself checking his phone, looking for clues, feeling ashamed of my own paranoia. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to grow, twisting around my peace of mind. Then came Thursday. Arthur said he had a late meeting. He often did. But this time, something felt off. His cologne was stronger, his shirt seemed too carefully pressed. As he left, I felt an irrational urge to follow him. I fought it, told myself to be reasonable. But after an hour of pacing, the urge won. I grabbed my car keys, a feeling of dread heavy in my stomach. I drove slowly, cautiously, not really knowing where I was going. I just drove the usual route he took to his office, then kept going, past the downtown buildings, towards the nicer part of town where the fancy restaurants were. And there, parked outside, the Gilded Spoon, a place we could never really afford to go to, was Arthur's car. My stomach twisted. I pulled into a dark corner of the parking lot, my heart thumping a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I waited, just watching. About 20 minutes later, the restaurant doors opened. And there they were. Arthur, laughing, his arm around a woman I didn't recognize. She was younger, with bright, sparkling eyes and a loud, unrestrained laugh that carried across the parking lot. My breath hitched. It was real. The text, the anonymous warning, it was all true. I don't know how long I sat there, watching them. They walked to his car, and he opened the door for her, a gesture he rarely offered me anymore. She leaned in, kissed his cheek, and then, as she got into the car, I heard her voice, clear as a bell. "Oh, Arthur, your wife said she'd survive without you? That's rich. She's probably sitting at home, crying into her stew. She'll never make it without you." And Arthur, my husband, chuckled. He actually chuckled. It was like a physical blow, a punch right to my gut. The words, "she just laughed when you'd survive without him," made sense now. They were laughing at me. At my pathetic belief in our life, at my quiet confidence that I could stand on my own 2 feet if I ever needed to. The anonymous text had been a warning, a window into a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. The humiliation was so intense, so raw, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I didn't confront him that night. I drove home, numb, mechanical. I pretended to be asleep when he finally came in, much later. The next morning, over coffee, I simply said, "Arthur, we need to talk." His face went pale. He knew. It was a short, sharp conversation. No long arguments, no dramatic tears from me. Just a cold, hard truth. I told him I knew everything. He tried to deny it, then minimized it, then finally, shamefaced, admitted it. He said he was confused, that it just happened. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw a stranger. "Get out, Arthur," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I want you out of my house by tonight." He protested, tried to plead, but I was done. The laughter, her laughter, echoing in my head, had solidified something in me. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was a fierce, burning resolve. They thought I wouldn't survive? They thought I'd cry into my stew? I'd show them. I'd show them all. That night, Arthur packed a small bag and left. The house felt empty, hollow, but also clean. A strange kind of peace settled over me, a peace born of utter devastation and a desperate need to rebuild. The next few weeks were a blur of divorce papers, legal fees, and the crushing weight of starting over. My savings, which I'd envisioned funding my future business, were now barely enough to cover the legal costs and keep the house for a few months. But that resolve, it stayed with me. It was like a tiny, flickering candle in a dark room. I started small. I opened my old laptop, dusted off my business plan for a consulting firm, Brenda's Solutions. It was rudimentary, mostly notes and half-formed ideas, but it was mine. I remembered Stella's mocking laugh, and a quiet, firm voice inside me whispered, "They're wrong, Brenda. You will survive. You will thrive." This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about proving them wrong. It was about rebuilding my life, not just for myself, but as a testament that I was more than Arthur's wife, more than someone to be laughed at. It was my first step. A terrifying, exhilarating first step towards something new. The initial months after Arthur left were brutally hard. Every day felt like walking through thick mud, each step a monumental effort. The divorce wasn't amicable, despite my initial hopes for a quick, clean split. Arthur, suddenly realizing what he was losing, tried to complicate things, delaying papers, fighting over trivial assets. He even tried to play the victim, making me out to be the unreasonable one. But I held firm. The memory of Stella's laugh, of Arthur's complicity, was a powerful shield against his manipulations. It fueled a cold determination in me that I didn't know I possessed. I sold a few old pieces of furniture, picked up some freelance writing gigs just to pay the bills, and started refining Brenda's Solutions. My plan was simple: help small businesses, especially those run by women, navigate the tricky waters of marketing and strategy. I knew I had a knack for seeing the bigger picture, for breaking down complex problems into manageable steps. My friend, Robert, a kind, practical man who ran a small graphic design studio, became my biggest cheerleader. We'd known each other for years, having volunteered together at the animal shelter. He listened patiently to my woes, offered advice, and, crucially, believed in my business idea. "Brenda," he'd say, leaning across my kitchen table, a cup of lukewarm tea in his hand, "you're smart, you're organized. People need what you offer. Just start. Even if it's small, just start." He was right. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day of chasing Arthur's lawyer, I sat down and sketched out my first simple service package. I created a basic website myself, using free templates, and started reaching out to local businesses I knew, offering my help at a discounted rate just to get some experience and testimonials. My first client was Mrs. Henderson, a sweet, elderly woman who owned a small antique shop down the street. She was struggling to get younger customers in the door. I helped her set up a basic social media presence, took some photos of her unique inventory, and suggested she host tea and antique events. It was a tiny project, but when I saw her shop bustling with new faces and Mrs. Henderson beaming, a surge of pride went through me. "Brenda, dear," she said, holding my hand, "you've made such a difference." "Thank you." That feeling, that sense of genuine contribution, was intoxicating. It was far more satisfying than any praise Arthur had ever given me. Slowly, painstakingly, Brenda's solutions started to grow. One client led to another, often through word of mouth. I worked out of my spare bedroom, which I converted into a makeshift office, its walls plastered with whiteboards covered in diagrams and ideas. There were days I felt completely overwhelmed, buried under invoices and marketing plans. I'd sit there, staring at the screen, wondering if I was crazy, if I should just give up and get a regular job. But then I'd remember Stella's laugh, the dismissive tone in her voice, and a stubborn resolve would harden in my gut. No, not yet. Not ever. I was doing this for me. The midpoint of this journey, about a year and a half after the divorce, brought a significant turning point. A local business association was hosting a small business fair, and Robert convinced me to get a booth. "It's exposure, Brenda," he insisted. "You'll meet people. You'll make connections." I was nervous, still a little shy about putting myself out there after everything. But I did it. I set up a small table with my homemade brochures and a bowl of wrapped candies. Most people walked past, but one man, Mr. Davies, the owner of a chain of local bakeries, stopped. He had an idea for a new product line and needed help with branding and a launch strategy. We talked for an hour. He liked my straightforward approach, my practical solutions. 2 weeks later, he called. He wanted to hire Brenda's solutions for a major project. My first big client. "Brenda," Robert exclaimed when I told him the news, "this is it. This is huge." We celebrated with a greasy pizza and cheap champagne, laughing until our sides ached. It was a turning point, not just financially, but emotionally. I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something real, something substantial. The business was thriving. I could finally afford to hire a part-time assistant, a bright young woman named Chloe, to help with administrative tasks. I even dared to dream about moving into a small office space downtown. Around this time, a mutual friend, Sarah, cautiously approached me. "Brenda," she began, "I saw Arthur the other day. He asked about you." I stiffened. "And?" He seemed surprised, a little shocked, actually, about your business. He said he heard you were doing really well. He looked, well, like he regretted things. My heart didn't flutter. It didn't ache. It felt nothing, just a dull, detached curiosity. "Regret is a powerful emotion, Sarah," I replied, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. But it's his to carry, not mine. I had truly moved on. The thought of Arthur, his life, his regrets, no longer held any power over me. My focus was entirely on Brenda's solutions, on the future I was meticulously crafting for myself. This business was my redemption, my triumph. It was the proof that I could stand, not just survive, but truly flourish on my own terms. The thought of that dismissive laugh had faded from a burning wound to a quiet, motivating ember. I was no longer driven by anger, but by a deep-seated pride in my own resilience and capabilities. Just when I thought Brenda's solutions was on an unstoppable trajectory, a major curveball hit. It was a Monday morning, about 3 years into the business. I had just moved into a modest, but professional office space, and Chloe was efficiently managing our growing client roster. We were on the cusp of signing a contract with a major regional chain, a deal that would propel us into the next league. Then, the phone rang. It was Mr. Miller, the CEO of the regional chain. His voice was grim. "Brenda, I'm so sorry. We're going in a different direction. A last-minute decision from the board. We've decided to go with a larger, more established firm." My heart plummeted. I felt a cold dread spread through me. This wasn't just losing a client, it was losing the client, the one that was supposed to secure our next phase of growth. The news hit me like a physical blow. "But Mr. Miller," I stammered, "we've been working on this for months. Our proposal was excellent." "I know, Brenda. You've been fantastic. It's truly nothing against you or your team. Just a strategic shift." He sounded genuinely regretful, but the decision was final. I hung up the phone, staring blankly at my pristine new office. A wave of despair washed over me. All that hard work, all those sleepless nights, all the sacrifices. Was it all for nothing? Was I still, deep down, the naive woman who couldn't survive without Arthur? The old doubts, long dormant, began to whisper in my ear. This felt like a second-act crisis, a moment where everything could unravel. Robert, ever the pragmatist, found me curled up in my office chair, staring out the window. "What happened, Bren?" he asked softly. I told him. He sat in silence for a moment, then took a deep breath. "Okay, this hurts. It sucks. But it's not the end. Remember Mrs. Henderson? Remember Mr. Davies? You built this, Brenda. You're tougher than one lost deal. What do we do now?" His words, quiet and firm, were like a lifeline. He didn't let me wallow. Together, we analyzed what went wrong, not in our pitch, but in the chain's decision-making process. We realized it was a shake-up within their own company, not a reflection of our capabilities. "We pivot, Brenda," he said. "We find other opportunities. We learn from this, and we move forward." And that's exactly what we did. Instead of retreating, I pushed harder. I reworked our service offerings, focused on niche markets that the larger, more established firms often overlooked, and intensified our networking efforts. Chloe, sensing my renewed resolve, stepped up even more, taking on additional responsibilities. Within a few months, we not only recovered, but we found ourselves with a more diverse client base, less reliant on any single big deal. The crisis had, unexpectedly, made Brenda's solutions stronger, more resilient. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving through adversity. My confidence, once shaken, was now rock solid. I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I could handle anything that came my way. This business, this life, was truly mine. Then, last week, it happened. Chloe came into my office, her eyes wide. "Brenda," she whispered, holding a resume, "you're not going to believe who just applied for the senior marketing consultant position." I took the resume from her, my fingers brushing against the crisp paper. I looked down, and the name, bold and clear, stared back at me. Stella Vance. My breath caught in my throat. Stella. Arthur's mistress. The woman whose mocking laughter had fueled my entire journey, the very seed of my ambition. She was applying for a job under me. The irony was almost poetic. I read through her resume. Her qualifications were decent, nothing spectacular, but she had experience. I felt a strange mix of emotions, a flicker of the old anger, a surge of triumph, and then, surprisingly, a sense of calm. This wasn't about revenge anymore, not truly. It was about seeing how far I'd come. "Schedule an interview, Chloe," I said, my voice steady. "Next Tuesday, 10 a.m. The day of the interview felt surreal. I sat across from her, in my office, at my desk, a small smile playing on my lips. Stella looked a little older, a little worn. The sparkle in her eyes seemed dulled. She didn't recognize me at first. My hair was different, my posture more confident, my entire aura transformed. We went through the usual interview questions. She answered professionally, if a little nervously. "So, Ms. Vance," I finally said, leaning forward slightly, "your experience is quite varied. Why Brenda's Solutions? Why us?" She fidgeted slightly. "Well, I've heard wonderful things about your firm. You're making quite a name for yourselves, especially with your innovative approach to small business growth. I'm looking for a place where I can truly contribute, a company with vision." I nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch. Then I looked her directly in the eye. "Do you remember me, Stella?" Her eyes widened, a slow realization dawning on her face. Her confident posture crumbled. Her cheeks flushed a deep crimson. "Brenda," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Oh my God. Brenda." "Yes, Stella. Brenda. Arthur's ex-wife. The one you laughed at, the one you said wouldn't survive without him." My voice was calm, almost detached. There was no anger, no vindictiveness, just a quiet, unassailable truth. "And here we are. You, applying for a job in the company I built." She stared at me, speechless, her jaw slack. The smugness, the condescension, the mocking laughter, it was all gone, replaced by shock and shame. This was the moment. The full circle. The humiliation I had felt all those years ago had come back, not as a weapon wielded by me, but as a silent, undeniable force of circumstance. I don't know what to say, she finally managed, her voice cracking. You don't need to say anything, Stella, I replied, standing up. I've heard everything I needed to hear years ago. About my ability to survive. About my capacity to build something incredible from nothing. I walked around my desk, stopping in front of her. I'm not hiring you, Stella. Not because of the past, though it certainly doesn't help. But because I need someone who truly embodies resilience, someone who knows how to overcome challenges with integrity and genuine grit. Someone who builds rather than just takes. And I don't believe you're that person. She looked devastated, but I felt no joy in her pain, only a profound sense of closure. She stood up slowly, nodded once, and quietly left my office. I watched her go, a small, knowing smile on my face. It wasn't about revenge, not in the way people think. It was about living a life so fully, so authentically, that the past became a mere footnote. My business was thriving, my life was mine, and I was exactly where I was meant to be. I had survived. I had thrived. And I had done it all without him, and despite her. That was the real victory. My final thought, the one that stays with me, is this. Sometimes, the greatest humiliation can be the most powerful spark for personal growth, pushing us to build a life so strong, so fulfilling, that the very people who doubted us end up on our doorstep, looking for a way in. Remember, your toughest moments can forge your greatest strengths. What's the biggest turning point that made you stronger? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it.